So much changes across our lives, right? Relationships change, our roles change, our beliefs change, the way we see ourselves changes. And even within all that change, there are often things that stay and that remain constant. So in this practice that I'm going to share with you, we will be using artifacts as a way of exploring the things that we carry through our life. This is part of my artifact exploration series where we use things like images, whether it's a tarot card, oracle card, Dixit card, found objects, charms, writing, really any kind of other type of artifact, really more as invitations for reflection, imagination, and meaning making. And this activity that I'm going to be sharing with you today is, I call it kept for a reason. What has remained even after everything else has changed. Something remaining could be a gift, it could be a burden, it could be a lesson, a habit, a relationship, a belief. And the purpose of this practice is to help us notice what has endured through change, recognize what we are already carrying, distinguish between what we want to preserve and maybe something that we want to reconsider and maybe let go of, connect with our memories, values, parts of ourselves that have remained meaningful, and really explore our lives more through curiosity than judgment. So the idea of using an artifact is that the object or the item itself does not hold a fixed meaning, right? The purpose is that it really becomes that doorway into reflection. And as you spend time with it, you might discover things that emerge, whether it's a memory, a question, a part of yourself, or a story that has been kind of just waiting to be illuminated in some way. And so the purpose of this practice really is less about finding an answer and more about noticing what emerges when we slow down and listen to our inner selves. So I do have this as a practice that's all written out as really more of a guided exploration. And so because of that, I'm not really going to go through every single part of it, right? Because like I was saying, there are different ways to enter into the exploration. One of those, of course, is like a tarot or oracle card, which I'm going to be sharing today. I also have ways of using charms, ways of using a found object, a found text, and then of course, just imagination. So for this video, I'm just going to go through choosing a card. Right, so, and of course you could choose this more deliberately, right? Where you're actually like looking through all the cards and choosing the one that seems to resonate with you. I'm just gonna go ahead and choose one randomly. So when I pull my card, I'm gonna notice what in this card captures my attention first, right? Whether it's an object, or a figure, or a color, or some kind of a small detail, or just the feeling of the whole scene. And for me, what I really notice the most when I pull this card are all these kind of like intricate, I guess, roots or branches or leaves, just part of like the bones of like the skeleton. They're in the tree, they're like in their root system, just all these like really kind of intricate little woven, design patterns, I guess, right? So that's kind of just what I noticed. Then I have questions. So these are all in my guide. What in this image feels like it has been kept? I'm gonna think about that one. I could write it down. I could answer it out loud. This like figure or body feels like it has been kept. What seems preserved, protected, or remembered? Again, the same part of the image to me. Why might this have remained? Right, and some of these you might want to sit with for a little bit longer. I'm just kind of breezing through them because this is really more for just demonstration purposes. And what does it staying reveal? Right, like what does the fact that this is preserved reveal? So it's just kind of a little bit of a quick exploratory piece here. And then thinking about this exploration, like anything about it, you know, what to me feels worth preserving? What has this helped me to recognize? What, if anything, feels newly seen, remembered, or understood in my own life? And what feels like it belongs with me now? So this is just a really kind of a quick way to go through one tarot card, right? And certainly, you know, you could go through the same practice with, you know, I could go through and explore a charm. I could go through and explore a found object, and then kind of come to that bring it home piece at the end of all of that. Now, I also have more ways to play section, and one of them is to just expand what's already here. So I could add a second artifact, right? So I could go ahead and pull another card and add that to this. Or I could add a charm or my found object or my piece of text or whatever I want to add to my exploration. And I'll just go ahead and work with the with this wing, because I pulled that first. And what does this new artifact add? So this really, to me, adds flight and movement, right? These are all very grounded and rooted, and this adds a little bit of like levity. What does it challenge? For me, it challenges stagnation. What becomes clearer? You know, just off the top of my head, possibility, right? What remains unchanged, right? The roots, I don't know. So just kind of playing around with adding a second artifact, right? Or another card. The other way to explore this type of a prompt is to do what I call an artifact map. So the idea here is what becomes visible when different artifacts enter the conversation. So sometimes one artifact opens that doorway, but sometimes several or more than three can even create a landscape. So you can do 2 or 3 or more if you wanted to, and basically just kind of, you know, gathering 2 or 3 artifacts. And you can certainly mix and match. So you could do, you know, 2 cards and then like this little charm or found object or whatever, or a poem. And start off by spending time with each one individually, right? So noticing what draws your attention for each one. What feelings do they evoke? What seems the most alive or curious or important? And what does each, you know, treating them each as artifacts, what does each one seem to carry? Then, so looking at them individually and then looking at them in relationship, right? So what changes once we put them and consider them together in a kind of field, right? What story starts to emerge? What connections or tensions appear? Right now, it's almost like this figure is almost looking in at this person, right? Maybe this is like actually in one shared space, right? What connections or tensions seem to appear, and maybe what does one artifact help you see in another, right? So like for me, that window and that the direction of how she's looking helps me see these more as connected. And then we can play around, and really you can go into this as detailed as you want, but thinking about if they could speak, right? Which one speaks first? Which one listens? To me, this one almost feels like a silent witness or a silent listener, kind of external to the scene almost. What do they say to one another? What do they offer? What do they agree about? Where do they disagree? And what together are they helping you, the kind of the outside observer, notice? Then we can even start to play around with roles, right? Which one feels like the one that has remained? To me, this one does kind of. What was forgotten? This, the keeper, the witness, the protector, the questions, and the answer. Also, this one could almost also be the answer, right? That neither of them are like looking at it. Nobody seems to be looking in the direction of this one, right? So the idea really is there's no right answers. It's kind of letting things reveal themselves and come up in the moment. And then there's another bring it home section for using like multiple artifacts, is, you know, looking across them, which one feels like, or what is it that feels like the thread that connects everything, right? And it could be something that's not necessarily present, right? So you could certainly add something that feels like it connects. And this is where you could pull deliberately, might be really helpful. Like, oh, you know, I want to look through and find the card that really seems to connect everything, or find an object that seems to connect these three things. You know, what has become clearer through the relationship among these? What, you know, what kind of has emerged? What surprised me? What feels worth carrying forward? And then I like to always kind of have like a capture at the end, kind of like something to contain what was just explored in a fairly succinct way. So that could be a word, a phrase, a question, a color, a sketch, a sticker, or really anything that helps you remember. And you can jot that in your journal, whatever you want to do. So that's a way to kind of go through this same theme, explore this same theme with like multiple cards or objects or items. Then there are other ways to deepen your reflection, whether that is, you know, if you just did like the one artifact exploration, or if you used multiple. And so I offer some different ways to change the medium. So continuing the exploration using a different creative form. So you could write a haiku. I give some different examples, but you know, I'll just read out a few of them. So choosing a song that kind of resonates and connects, creating a tiny altar or display, whether it's, you know, using the artifacts that you've explored, or creating something, in drama therapy we call it an aesthetic response. Or even just finding, like I was saying, another object or another artifact that kind of completes the story. And notice how changing the medium of exploration changes what you notice, if at all. Another way is to change the lens. So, you know, maybe whatever card you pull or that really speaks to you, and you explore that same one on a different day, and you ask kind of that theme of what's remaining, and using that tool, that artifact, to guide your response. So what has remained in my relationships generally, or maybe what has remained in my relationship to my body, to my creativity, to my family, to my work, my spirituality, or my community. You know, thinking about what changes maybe, and really also what stays the same. And using that artifact as a way to enter into that exploration in a really creative and different way. And then finally, another way is to stay with one question. So instead of answering every prompt, right, like what I was sharing was kind of a lot, just choose a single question that really kind of seems to stand out to you, right? So even noticing what resonates with you within the larger practice itself, and kind of letting that question just kind of follow you throughout the day, and just seeing what starts to gather around it. Almost like that single question is a precipitate, and it's kind of drawing forth certain experiences and certain types of noticing throughout the day, really. So, if this exploration sparked something for you, and if you want the full practice, the full written out PDF guide, it is available as a download. And so it includes all of the prompts, different ways to enter the practice, like with different artifacts, and additional ways to deepen your reflection. So you can certainly use that independently with the guide, and you know, certainly this really lends itself to journaling. But if you'd like kind of more support in exploring what comes up and being guided more directly in the process, I also offer guided artifact exploration sessions. I have lots of different themes. This is just one of them. But in those sessions, we might begin with an artifact that feels really meaningful to you and explore, you know, the imagery, your associations, memories, and personal connections through conversation, writing, and really kind of that more creative reflection, and using those as ways to follow what unfolds and make space for new insights, questions, and discoveries. So if you're interested in the guide or those exploration sessions, feel free to email me, and be sure to subscribe to my channel for more creative self-exploration practices.